Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you for attending. Welcome to this meeting of the Governance Committee. The meeting today is open to the public. It will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later on the Council website. It's also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. The agenda and reports for the meeting are available on the Council website and on the Modern Gov app, and paper copies are also available here at the front if anyone doesn't have them already. Can I please request that any mobile telephones or any other such equipment are switched to silent mode so as not to disturb the meeting? And just to confirm, there is no fire test planned for today, so if there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the Town Hall staff. My name's Fran Belbin. I'm the Councillor for Firth Park Ward and Chair of this committee. I'll ask councillors to introduce themselves.
Councillor Rob Bannister from Graves Park Ward.
Councillor Mary Lee from Darnell Ward. Morning colleagues, Councillor Eldard from Manor Castle.
Paul Turpin, Green Councillor, Gleadless Valley.
Good morning, Councillor Julie Greycoat, Member for Stocksbridge and Upton Ward.
Councillor Mike Levery, Member for West Ecclesfield Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Tim Hagan, Crooks and Crossbow Ward.
Councillor Sue Alston, Councillor for Fulwood Ward.
Thank you, and if I can just ask the officers at the front to introduce themselves.
David Hollis, General Counsel.
Philippa Burdett, Democratic Services.
Thank you, and I'll ask other officers to introduce themselves as the items come up. The next item is apologies for absence, and I think everybody is here, so thank you. And item 3, there are no items to exclude the press and public from this meeting. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Would anyone need to declare an interest in this meeting? Nope, thank you. Item 5 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Can members approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of November 2024? Everyone happy to approve? Thank you. Item 6, we have received no petitions, public questions or statements for this meeting, so we will move straight on to item 7, which is the community strategy and community engagement, establishing one conversation with members. I think, Alice, will you be presenting initially? Oh, Tom Smith, who's our Director of Customer Experience and Communities, I think will be introducing this item. And Alice, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well as we take it forward. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So, I'm Tom Smith. I'm Director of Customer Experience and Communities. And I am leading the work around our community strategy going forward. I don't know, Alice, whether you want to introduce yourself at this point.
Yeah, Alice Nicholson, Policy and Improvement Officer, who's also been supporting your working group, which this report is very much about, and the work that you've been doing on the community engagement.
Thanks, Alice. So, so just very briefly, this is quite a short report. Just to talk about the work that's been taking place within this committee around public involvement. So, obviously in December 2023, this committee established a cross-party working group looking at an ambitious vision in terms of community engagement and off the back of recommendations in the report from Involve. The working group first met in March 2024. It's had 9 councillors on that and has been a really positive piece of work. And there's also been a lot of involvement from a number of citizens, stakeholders, voluntary community, faith, social enterprise sectors, representatives, and a number of kind of experts from the sector as well. And there's been, I know, really good conversations. In September 2024, there was a working group and a stakeholder workshop to look at participation as a route to be developing the council's vision around engagement. And then in February 2025, there was a further working group where members of the working group met a group of the participants from that September workshop and a number of people with expertise in academic and practical areas of that kind of work as well, to look at views around a possible model of engagement in the city and to help shape the next workshop. That workshop in September and the one in February were really well received, and lots of involvement and really positive work that came out of that. It really sought to look at how what the community's experience was in terms of how the council engages with people and how it collaborates well or not well on different things in terms of that. And there was real agreement that we should be working together as a city, not just in terms of Sheffield City Council's role, and putting that within the Sheffield Stronger Together work, and making sure that it's mapped across in terms of conversations across a number of strategies in the city. The feedback from that was that we needed to make sure that we got an overarching strategy right in terms of prerequisite for that engagement work. Engagement on its own without having all the other nuts and bolts in place that then enable you to actually act on some of that and change the way we operate is challenging. And I think there's a view from the workshops that needed to be the case. So members will obviously be aware that we're now progressing to a community strategy, and that community strategy in and of itself will shape the way that the council works in the city with its partners and its communities going forward, and will shape the way we deliver, design, commission services, and essentially obviously will shape the way that we talk to people about the commissioning, design and delivery of those services going forwards. And getting that strategy right is a really key step, because it will influence everything we do as an organisation in terms of out into the city. And the intention for that strategy is that we make sure we co-develop that with key stakeholders. So obviously yourselves as elected members, community partners, officers, Sheffield residents and various people. We've started that process of engagement. In doing that, it's become really clear that we're effectively engaging a lot of the same people who were being engaged in the engagement work through this committee. So there's some real practical stuff actually about trying to have one conversation with the same people and not duplicate effort, and linking in these pieces of work really clearly, so we end up with one coherent approach and vision going forwards. We've set out a proposal in this paper that helps to do that, hopefully. So we're proposing that the public involvement member working group that was established by this committee becomes a member working group that contributes to the community strategy. And we're proposing that we supplement that group with the chair, vice chair and group spokesperson from Communities, Parks and Leisure Policy Committee, and make sure we get representation from the future Sheffield member working group as well. It will hopefully then make sure that the work that's already been done within this working group contributes to community strategy, and then it has real teeth when we get into the delivery of it post-strategy. So we actually, when we engage, it does actually enable change. Because the strategy will be in place. We will obviously put clear terms of reference in place. Initial focus will be about getting a really clear elected member view about our ambitions around that community strategy and where we want to be. And that will be, as say, alongside that similar work with community partners, officers, residents and those experts that were previously engaged as well in the engagement work. So that's the proposal. That's probably the limit of what I was going to say. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tom. It's probably just worth clarifying that the community strategy was commissioned by the Strategy and Resources Committee back in October, November time, I think. And the timeline for that work is to report back to Strategy and Resources in September. So there's still quite some way to go in developing this strategy. And as Tom said there, the feedback that we've had through our community engagement work has all been fed into that already, and we'll intend to involve the people who have participated in workshops, etc., with the ongoing development of the community strategy. I saw Julie first and then Sue.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a sensible way forward. I think it's important that we are just having one conversation around all of the issues so that things don't get lost or misinterpreted in where we're going. But I'd just be interested if you could please, Tom, give us the information in terms of, with the member working group that you are wanting to establish for this, the number of members from each political group that will be in that working group, please. If you could just confirm what those numbers would look like. Thank you.
I'll take 2 or 3 questions at a time. So Sue.
Thank you. I think mine are more comments than questions, but so I've got a couple of fairly sort of
suggestion type comments for going forward. I mean, I am very pleased that we've finally got to this point, but I do have to say that I feel incredibly disappointed that it's taken us this long. If we go back to the minutes of the November meeting, so 4 months ago, it was raised at that meeting that we were having duplicate processes, if you like, to deal with community engagement. It was me that raised it, so I know. And we were assured it would be brought together, but it was to be separate. We also, as the group that was set up by this committee, has only met once in September to do some really valuable work, but then nothing has happened since. And I know you've talked about other work that's been done by another group, but that's not something we've been aware of. I mean, sort of, you know, in the background, but it's not something we've had any direct involvement with. So I just have, and when you look at the minutes from the November meeting, there was lots of time scale in there, which has slipped dramatically. And I just feel a level of disappointment that we haven't managed to get to this point a lot quicker. However, we have, so that's it. We need to go forward. And just a couple of points that I want to make about moving forward, which is one, I'm reading that the plan is to agree some terms of reference, which I think are very important because otherwise things tend to sprawl, at our meeting in April. And I just wonder, is there a plan to make sure we finalise the membership of that group at that meeting as well? Because I think that would be useful, obviously subject to your answering Councillor Grocut's questions. And the other thing is that there's no mention in here, unless I've missed it, which is possible, about regular communication with the LACs, which I do think is really important given their community role. So I know when we discussed this informally, we have said we need to involve the LACs on a regular basis. So I think that should be noted here today. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just going to respond to a couple of those points because I think they're inaccurate, actually. There was a second, all the working group members were invited to the meeting that we had in January. I think Councillor Williams attended on behalf of your group, so it's not true to say that the group only met the once. And I think as well we should probably reflect back that when we originally started this work, there was a suggestion that it then was driven forward by strategy and resources as part of that single strategy, and that was rejected by some members of this committee. So I think we've come to where we are, but I think the way you've characterised it is inaccurate there, Sue, if I'm honest with you. I am pleased that we've made the progress that we have, and that we've had the feedback that we've had has been incredibly useful, but I agree, obviously, that we need to have the one conversation and take it forward. I saw Mary next.
Thank you. My question is about the LACs, leading on from what Sue's mentioned. We've had community strategy at the LAC Chairs meeting, and in the last meeting we talked about various member working groups the LAC Chairs might be involved in, and that would be cross-party from LAC Chairs' position. We started a piece of public engagement work just specifically for the LACs a while back, or probably a year ago now, and it was paused because of this work, which is fine, absolutely. You know, we need to be comprehensive. So just where are the LACs going to be involved in this particular specific piece of work and member involvement? Because I know we engage with the public. It's a general public. It's not specific groups or communities of interest, that kind of thing. Although we might do, but we have got a part to play in public engagement.
Do you want to respond to those, Tom, and then I'll take some more comment?
Yeah, of course. So I'll go backwards, if that's okay. Sometimes easy. So LAC engagement, I absolutely agree. It's critical. So Carl Maluli, if you don't know, is the head of services responsible for delivery of the LACs. Carl is actually doing a huge amount of work supporting the community strategy work, and is kind of the delivery lead to some extent in that from within my team. So the LAC voice will clearly be front and centre in terms of this conversation. I think when we look to the membership of the working group as it stood, there was a degree of overlap between the LAC and the member working group of this meeting potentially. So I guess in the interest almost of efficiency of time, I guess our assumption was that we could cover it in that way, but really happy to have a conversation, Mary, about whether we need to do something almost more formal in terms of ensuring that we've got a number of LAC chairs, formally plugged into this meeting. I would also want to say this isn't, this working group isn't almost like the limit of our engagement around the strategy. So clearly we've been to LAC chairs already. The intent would be to come back to LAC chairs a number of times as we develop through the community strategy. When we talk about the community strategy, there's some really critical questions within that piece of work. And one of them is that one about our intent in terms of locality working going forward on community development and all that space. And clearly the LACs will have a key role in that. And we put off the LAC review work, as you know, because of the community strategy as well. And ultimately, the community strategy will then influence that LAC review work going forward as well. So the LACs are absolutely critical, Councillor Lee. So you're absolutely right. We need to make sure we link it in. So really happy to have a conversation about how we best do that following this meeting. We do the terms of reference conversation, maybe. I think similarly on the numbers, Councillor Croker, I don't have the numbers at the moment in terms of balance. What I would say is the kind of the core starting point is the group that was doing the work out of this committee, which I think was relatively balanced in terms of the political groups. What we would be adding to that is effectively, at the moment, is Communities, Parks and Leisure, the 3 people who are currently the lead members within that group, plus potentially a conversation with LACs. Once we've done that, really happy to look at the numbers and see whether we feel that's balanced or not, Councillor Grocott, and that will come into that terms of reference conversation. So I suppose the final thing just on that is that it would be really probably helpful in terms of getting things moving, that we, outside of this meeting, if the recommendations of this report are approved within this committee today, we can do some work outside to do some distribution of a potential terms of reference and some membership before the April meeting, so that when we get into the April meeting, we've already hopefully got a degree of agreement to where we want to be in terms of membership and other things, just in the interest of time, because we're really keen to get on with the work. Actually, Councillor Alston, as you said, we need some pace and we need to keep the momentum, which is behind the strategy in the main, to be honest, because September is really, really tight as well for the strategy work. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Elle.
Hi, and thanks very much for bringing this report. Like others, I'm really pleased to see that we've been able to bring these different strands of work together, and it's really exciting that we're doing the community strategy at all. It feels like a really important piece of work that could be quite transformative in the way that we think about both how we're governed as a council and how we engage with our wider communities. So I really welcome the report. I just had one question, which is that we've obviously engaged with a number of key civic stakeholders through the work that we did in September and then also in February. And I just wondered how this decision will be communicated to them in addition to the kind of normal decisions made in committees. It feels like we owe something to them as part of bringing them on the journey with us from the relationship that we've had with them in the prior group, to being clear with them about how they'll be involved in the new community strategy and what opportunities they'll have to shape that. So it'd be great if you could say something about both how we'll communicate this decision and what their role might be in the next phase. Thanks.
Shall I respond to part of that? I've already been in touch with some of those people, certainly from the January-February meeting. I've lost track of when it was. I think it was in January, actually. But, and explained how we're planning to bring this work together. So I've been in communication with them this week. And what I'd hope to see going forward is that as we get to perhaps a first draft of the community strategy, or similarly, that we bring people from the workshop back together in order to feed into that. But I'll let Tom, perhaps I can add a question actually as well, which is in terms of how going forward, do we want to, I appreciate that the community strategy belongs, if you like, to Strategy and Resources Committee, but I think it'd be great, given the input this committee has had, if we could continue to get updates around it as well. Again, there are some people in the wider public who I think have really engaged with this work through the Governance Committee, so we might want to think about how we can perhaps just keep the committee updated on the progress of the work. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Belbin, and thanks, Councillor Dodd. Yeah, so as Councillor Belbin said, we've already kind of informally said that we will be bringing some of this decision to some of those stakeholders, so they kind of know this is coming. I'm already in touch, kind of individual, with a number of the people who were involved in the previous work as well. Actually not off the back of this work, to some extent, more off the back of me just reaching out into the city and saying we're doing a community strategy, kind of where do we want to have a conversation. So if the committee agree this report today and agree the recommendation, then clearly off the back of that we'll be reaching out very, very quickly to those experts to say this is how we want you now to be involved and this is how you can now be involved. To be frank, they're already contacting me and saying how can we get involved, because they're really enthusiastic about the work. So I think it'd be a relatively easy thing to do, but absolutely right, we need to make sure we do it relatively fast. In terms of committee updates, the community strategy by definition is actually a cross-council strategy. And one of the things we do need to think about, even though it was commissioned by Strategy and Resources, there are a number of key stakeholders from a committee perspective as well in this work. This is one of them. Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee as a committee as well need to be fully kept up to date and informed about how this progresses before we get to the decision point of signing off the strategy. So the intent is to make sure that we've got those linkages and those updates in place across this, especially to those two particular committees. But probably there is a broader piece in terms of wider member briefing as well, given, as I say, the intended breadth of what the strategy will cover across the council going forward.
Thank you. Mike?
Yes, thank you. It's just looking at one of the recommendations, number 3, about terms of reference and work programme. We've still to determine who will come on the group, the working group, and we have to get that work done and a work programme together before the next governance meeting, which is in April, which is fairly tight. So who will go about determining the membership and pulling that together? That's the first point. And then when's the meeting going to take place to allow the terms of reference and the work programme to be developed? Thank you.
Thanks. Again, I'll probably highlight that the group already has a membership, so, and obviously groups might want to look at that again in the light of how the work's taken forward, but there is an existing membership of that working group. I'll take Sue and then Julie.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really just for clarification on the status of this group. Is this a group that is reporting back to Governance Committee? Is it a group reporting back to Strategy and Resources Committee? Is it reporting back to another subcommittee that's doing the wider bit of work in the community strategy? I think that would be useful to know, so we know where we're going. I'll leave it at that.
Julie.
Thanks, Chair. If we look at the membership of the working group, we've got 8 members of the administration and myself as the 1 member of the opposition. And if we're adding the 3 members of the Communities, Parks and Leisure, my group doesn't even have a representative on there. So any work that goes through Communities, Parks and Leisure in relation to those 3 members bringing that to the working group, then that doesn't give my group the opportunity to look at that information either, and then leaves us with a situation where we've got 11 members of the administration and 1 member of opposition on a working group. That is actually what you will all be agreeing to if you agree to the second recommendation on this paper. So I just wanted to draw that to everyone's attention. Thank you.
Paul.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Julie, because I was thinking of things along that line. Is that, like many of the strategies in this council, they look good on paper, but then the proof is in the pudding, and people do not practice what they preach. I could point to changing the way public questions are asked in full council, and then when people put questions in and are unaware that the deadline has changed, being refused to allowed to ask them. That's not engaging with the public when the public are trying to engage with the council. And when we talk about putting people first, well, clearly the point that Julie has just made, we do not put people first. The meetings for this committee can happen any time on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for people who have to work. That is incredibly exclusive. To put down here, we'll have the chair, the deputy chair and the spokesperson from the Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee. Well, you've insisted that the spokespeople is a voluntary role. It's an unpaid role, but yet here you're obliging them to go and do extra work that is also unpaid, not considering whether they also have to go to work to feed their families. You know, why is one of the groups in the council more or less excluded from this? You know, it is hard being a lone councillor. I've been a lone councillor on many committees since I was elected. It's tough when you're a small group. And, you know, we've got particularly we've got a group of really experienced councillors. Julie Grocott is an excellent councillor and very experienced and very much connected with our community. And she is expected to do all of this work on a voluntary basis at other people's leisure. You know, it's not, you're not including people. I think that the way you answered Councillor Alston's questions before was with arrogance and disdain. That is not an inclusive way to speak to people. This committee under your leadership is not inclusive. And I don't believe that this strategy, however well it's written, will be delivered in a good, beneficial and inclusive way.
Okay, Councillor Turpin, what I was going to suggest is that we add some wording to that recommendation that says something around with a view to political proportionality, because I totally agree with your point that we do need to make sure that with the existing membership plus the 3 people from Communities, Parks and Leisure, I think you're probably right, it will not be politically proportionate. So I would suggest that we review it anyway as we're getting towards April, May. I'm sure all members will be reviewing, all groups will be reviewing who are members of which committee and so on. So we do have a chance to review that. So if that's all right, yeah. David, if we can just add a phrase at the end, and to review the membership with regard to political proportionality, then I think we can take that point on board, if that's okay with you, Julie. I am aware, Paul, that meetings of this committee have been at different times, and I have flagged it up indeed at the last meeting. We had a discussion about how we need to plan better in order to make sure that members can participate in the group, because we are aware that, yes, the meetings have taken place at different times, and as you'll be aware, it's incredibly difficult for officers to plan a schedule for all committee meetings and all the additional meetings that take place that are suitable for everybody to attend, and that is a really difficult job. We appreciate that, and we will try to ensure that meetings take place on days when members are available for the meetings, but I think we all know that's not always possible. And yes, I do appreciate that some members are working and that it is difficult. People have got different schedules that are difficult to work around. That's something that everybody in the council has to manage, and Tom.
Just really briefly, I kind of take all the points that have been made, and I think the amendment to the recommendation makes a lot of sense. You know, there's no intent from officers to create kind of an imbalance in terms of this working group. Indeed, what we want is a really diversity of views, actually, as we go forward and develop this strategy. I suppose, I guess two other points I would make is, one is this proposal was hopefully about trying to reduce, in a sense, the amount of time that we try to demand from members on some of this work, because this was about consolidating the community engagement working with a necessary piece of engagement work with members on the community strategy, and doing it within one group to officers at least felt like an efficient use of everybody's time. So, but I'm very conscious, obviously, you know, members' time is precious, and it's difficult often to coordinate things. I kind of wanted to address Councillor Turpin the comment about the strategy, which I kind of take on board to some extent. What I would say is that this strategy is designed, because it's through Strategy and Resources Committee, to be a tier 1 strategy within our governance framework. It once developed, the intent is that it will genuinely determine the way the council operates across the piece. So it will sit above all of our other strategies, and it will kick off a piece of transformation work through Future Sheffield, which you'll know about in terms of that programme of work, in terms of genuinely changing the way the council actually operates going forward. So that's hugely challenging, it's hugely ambitious, but I guess my kind of commitment is to kind of keep coming back to that challenge, because you're absolutely right. A strategy without delivery is of very little worth. But our intent is that it will be a strategy with a degree of teeth, and it will genuinely change the way in which we do things.
Sorry, I don't think we've come back on your question, have we, Sue, in terms of who the working group is reporting to? I think my view is that the community strategy is a piece of strategy and resources work, so the working group will report there, but I'd be keen for, as I say, updates to continue to come to this committee as well, if that's your view as well, Tom.
It is. So ultimately, the governance rules, the strategy will be signed off through Strategy and Resources Committee. But clearly what we would be really keen to do is we recommend that report for sign off to Strategy and Resources Committees to be able to say, we've also reported this through to Governance Committee, we've also reported this through to Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee, we've also have a conversation into local area committees, and we have consensus around this strategy, and therefore we're able to recommend it on that basis. So we're really keen that the governance decision reflects the engagement that's taken place prior to it.
Mike?
Yeah, just to comment on that, it is important that it goes through governance before S&R. This is a bit like a finance situation where finance was going bypassed and straight to S&R. So we've now got a mechanism in place. I think this is the same. Thank you.
I think if people happy with that suggestion that we ask for this to come back to governance for a recommendation to S&R. I'm seeing nods to that. Julie?
Just at the risk of throwing another complicating factor in, for which I apologise, but I'm blaming Sue for bringing it up in the first place. It would be interesting to know how many local area committee chairs there are within the suggested membership working group, because if they're sufficient, then I think we may have got that covered off, because I do think that is fundamentally important, that the likes are really wired into that. But if not, then we have Mary on this committee, and I think then as the chair of the likes, then at least that would be a sensible way forward to make sure that Mary can do the proper engagement with all of the chairs. I do really think that, we are missing a trick if we've not got the likes really well and truly engaged in this situation. Thank you.
Thanks. From memory, it's Councillor Brian Homeshaw who's chair of the Central LAC, and I think Councillor Simon Clement Jones is also on the working group, who's chair of the South LAC, but certainly happy for Mary to be involved with the work as well. Is there any other points on this? Okay, I will take us through the recommendations then. So the recommendations are to agree that the public involvement member working group established by this committee becomes a member working group contributing to the development of the community strategy. Agrees that the chair, vice chair and group spokesman from the Communities, Parks and Leisure Policy Committee and by representation from the future Sheffield member working group be invited to join the working group, with the additional line that I suggested earlier, subject to review according to political proportionality. Is that wording acceptable? Yeah. Agree that the terms of reference and a work programme for the revised working group be approved by the working group and reported to Governance Committee in April 2025. Are we happy with those recommendations? Yeah, thank you. Okay, we will move on to our next item, which is the work programme. And I think, David, you're going to take us through this.
Philippa, are you going to take that?
Excuse
Alice,
me, Chair. I
sorry.
often do
It
that.
says report of the General Counsel here. That's
We'll pass it round, pass the parcel. It's in David's name, but I did write it. It's your standard work programme, but I think the thing to flag up is also that there is only one meeting left for this year. So I think it's section 4, page 36 tells you what's been moved or is new. And those 4 things that are mentioned, which is review of public questions, policy committee procedure rules, future of urgency subcommittees, review of full council, do all appear in the timetable at the end. Admittedly, some of them are actually to be determined exactly when. So if we perhaps move down to page 41, so you've got today's on there, and then the April meeting, there will be the remits review recommendations, a little bit more of an update now from what we've heard just now about community strategy and community engagement, and if I'm right, David, I think on there's also future of urgency subcommittees. something that's also to be determined most likely for the June committee, the date of which of course nobody knows yet, will be the review of full council that's been mentioned previously. I think the items that are also of interest to you are the ones that don't have a date associated with them. The first one's around charity subcommittee and the sort of the governance of that side. There has been a suggestion that might be possible to include something on the April meeting, but it is quite a tight agenda. There will be, when I say review of public questions and petition schemes, what we actually mean is it's reviewing that scheme that's been implemented. We're not reopening it, and we've got a lot of data that we need to gather, I think, as part of that and share with you. So it's about a testing of whether that system works, what's good, what's better, what's perhaps not so good, from various different points of view, actually, because it's those who ask questions, there's those who actually have to do the work prior, the officers responding, and the kind of Democratic Services Committee support team who have to manage the process as well. So there's quite a few people to hear from. And then also on there's policy committee procedure rules. So that's what's in the work programme, and I think you always have to kind of reflect on the fact that as it comes to the end of the municipal year, membership of the future governance committee is not always known, but it's always sensible to at least have a plan of what are important items for this particular committee. So just want to check, really, it's are you all in agreement? Are there more questions?
Thank you, Alice. I think our suggestion was that with the April agenda already looking relatively full, that we meet very early in the new municipal year to agree dates for the items that don't currently have a date, so that we can schedule those appropriately during the course of the year, if that's acceptable to members. Are there any other questions or comments on the work plan? No, are we happy to approve that plan then, please? The recommendations are that the committee's work programme as set out in Appendix 1 be agreed, including any additions and amendments or items to be confirmed, identified in Part 1, and to note that the next meeting in April is the last this municipal year, and consider impact on capacity and implications for prioritisation of additional items and or additions to the Governance Committee's forward work plan. Everyone in agreement with those? Okay, thank you. And that just brings us then to our final item, which is to note that the date of the next meeting will be held on the 30th of April 2025 at 2 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for attending.